The next option is walk cycle. This option creates a quick and simple animation of walk cycle for your character. To use this option, first you must have rigged your character, and the other point is that this option is not just for human characters, but it can also be used to animate animal characters. For animals with 4 legs, you should use this option twice, once for front legs, neck, shoulders, and head, and another one for the back legs and hips. Animal tails should also be animated manually. Well, I should also note that the walk cycle option is most consistent with the default structures of the. And if you're using other structures or custom structures when using walk cycle, first you have to introduce your controllers here and then click walk cycle option to be applied properly. And since we use the default structure of the we won't have any problem in using it. Well, to apply this option, first we select all our controllers and then click walk cycle option. Once the walk cycle operation completes, it creates a layer named walk cycle, and you can see its icon here. Let me bring it this side and enlarge this side to see it better. We don't need our controllers anymore, so I hide them. Well, after you apply walk cycle and play, you see it quickly creates a very simple animation for your character. But sometimes your character is tall, sometimes it's short, and this tool cannot detect all of this well. For example, in this character the arm is so much bent, while it should be straight. Also when walking, its legs don't stand upright, and always are bent. That is not true. To solve this problem, first we select the hip controller and go to the exact frame where the character's leg places below its body. It's here. It should be straightened. To straighten the legs, we raise the hip a bit up, so that the leg stands up straight. Well, let's have a look to see how it is. That's fine. Now we should straighten the arms a bit. To do this, we select the arm controllers. Also, I should note that after you apply walk cycle, it creates keyframes for your controllers. As you see, because I was at this frame when applying walk cycle, the keyframes of this controller created here. So we bring them to the first frame. We go to the frame where the leg of the character stands up straight, and straighten the arm of our character. Well, it's also to note that walk cycle uses FK to animate the character's arm. So as you can see, IK is disabled. To straighten the arm of the character, we go to FK, individual control, and upper that controls the arm. We rotate this so that the arm becomes straight. We also straighten the forearm. Then we do the same for the other arm too. To see clearly whether the arm is placed exactly straight or not, I select the hand layers. As you see, when I change the settings, it creates keyframes. So to apply the change I made from beginning of timeline, I bring them to the first frame. Let me hide the hip. Let's look at the animation of the character again to see how it is. That's fine now. To make it better, we go to the setting of walk cycle effect. The first option we see in walk cycle effect is general motion. This option allows you to control the start and the end of walk cycle. For example, I set it to 0 at second 1 and add a keyframe. 20 frames ahead, I set it to 100. Well, I press U key to see the keyframes. And here I create a keyframe again in the same setting, and 20 frames ahead, set it to 0 again to stop walk cycle again. So it starts walking and stops again, very simply. Offset allows you to specify in what situation your character is at the start of walking. For example, its left leg is ahead or its right leg. You can adjust it here. Well, the next option here is main parameters. It has two other options, character and walk cycle. In character option, you can specify the height of your character. The higher the height of the character, the lower the speed of its walking. And the shorter the height of your character, the faster the speed of its walking will be. For example, here it is 180, so it walks like this. But if I set it to 100 and specify its height lesser, you see the walking speed will increase. Well, let me return it to 180. Way to specify the character's heaviness now is 70. The more the weight of the character, the slower the speed. For example, I set it to 150. If I set it to 70, you see the speed will be faster again. Well, the next option is energy. This option allows you to control the range of the joint's movements. It means if the knee joint rotates 45 degrees, an increase in this option will make the rotation angle greater. For example, now its value is 10, so it's animated like this. But if I set it to 50, you see the legs, arm, wrists, and ankles rotate in a greater angle. Well, let me set it to its default 10. Softness is the laxity of the joints. The greater this value, the softer the movement. For example, if I set it to 50, you see its softness will increase. Well, I return to its default 20. Let's go to the next option, walk cycle. Walk cycle includes two options. The first option is walk speed that specifies the speed of your character. It doesn't mean the speed of its walking, but it's the distance it moves. The higher its value, the longer the distance the character moves. I mean his steps get longer. For example, now it's -3 and I set it to 7. As you see, the steps get longer. The next option is type. You can specify two types of walk cycle for the character. The first option is realistic, which specifies a realistic walk cycle. And the second one is dancing, which is similar to Mickey Mouse walk cycle. Let's go to the next option, that's secondary controls. Here are the settings for neck, head, body, arm, and feet. Next one specifies the amount of head rotation. Now it's 3 and its head rotates 3 degrees. If I set it to 20, you see head rotation increases. And next softness also determines the softness of this movement. For example, if I set it to 30, it moves like a spring. Well, let me return these values to the previous state. Next option is body swing. This option specifies the amount of body rotation. Now it's 3, so let me set it to 20 to make it clear. As you see, its body rotation increase. Body up-down motion also indicates the amount of up-down motion of the character's body. For example, here I set it to 20 to make it clearly. Let me set walk cycle type to realistic and this to its default 3. Hip swing is also for controlling the character's hip rotation. That doesn't need much explanation. And arm swing is also for controlling the character's arm. I set it to 15 to see how it moves. Let me return the body values to its default 5. Well, that's good. Shoulder swing is also for controlling shoulders movement, and arm softness determines the softness of this movement. Well, I think it will be better if I set it to 30. The next option is feet height that specify how far your character's feet are lifted up from the ground when walking. As you see, the foot's distance from the ground is this much. And I want to increase it. As you can see, the character's foot is lifted up more than before. Well, foot rotation is the rate of the foot rotation when the character's foot is lifted up from the ground. If you note, the maximum rate of the character's foot rotation is this. But if I set it to 150, the rotation will increase and it completely turn backward. As you can see, it helps the foot movement seem more realistic. The next option is hit the ground. That determines the rate of the character's ankle rotation when it's put on the ground. Let me increase it to see what I mean. And finally, as you saw, these options are for the character's movement details to help us get better results. The other remaining option called animation data is not very useful and mostly includes the setting related to expression that don't need much explanation. The next option is Effector. Effector is a tool that allows you to control the animation of one layer or several layers by an effector. Let's take a look at the example. Well, first I created a square and two states for it. So I select the layer and press U key to show its keyframes. This is the first state of the shape, and when I go to the next keyframes, its second state appears with change in roundness, rotation, and color. To use Effector tool, first we select the properties we created animation for and want to change by Effector, and then click Effector. As soon as you click on it, a layer called Effector is created here, and in Effect Control window it creates an effect named Effector. The first option is inner limit that specifies the inner circle limits. An outer limit option specifies the outer circle limits. So, if I move the effector before it reaches the layer, it's on the first state. As it reaches the limits between the two circles, it starts to change. And by reaching the inner circle, it goes to the second state. And after it passes the layer, it again returns to the first state. Well, this is the circle mode that's selected in mode option. It has another mode, infinite line, that doesn't return to the first state. For example, if I move and pass it through the layer, it changes to the second state, but it doesn't return to the first state. And when its mode is infinite line, auto limit doesn't work anymore. Let's switch it to circle mode. Well, we go to the next option, that's interpolation. In interpolation option, there are two options. One is type, that specifies the type of the effector operation. That its default mode is transition, that it was explained, and we saw when the effector reaches the layer goes to the second state, and by passing through it, the layer returns to the first state. This is transition. The other type is ping pong, that from the beginning our layer starts to change, and when it's in the outer circle limits, it's changed to the second state, but when it's reached to the inner circle limits, it returns to the first state. So it has ping pong mode. As you see, it's changed to the second state and returns again to the first state. The next option is reverse, that as you see reverses the operation. So let's switch it to transition. Now I wanna apply this effector to these layers. What should we do for this? We select all properties of the layer that have been animated or their keyframes. So we selected their keyframes and then click on effector button. Let me go to effect control window and make the circle a bit smaller. And as you see, now by moving the effector among the layers, these layers change and are animated. The other point to say is that suppose we created an effector for this square. And after that, we needed to add another layer to the effector. To do this, you just need to select the keyframes of other layers, select the effector layer, and then click on the effector again. Simply, you can add new layers to your effector. The next option to explain is a spring. This option creates a spring effect for our animation. For example, I animate the position of this circle. 10 frames ahead, I bring it here, select its position, and click on the spring button. When I click on the spring, a new effect is created in Effect Controls window. Well, let's take a look to see how it is. You see, a spring effect is created. The first option is elasticity. That's both the amplitude and frequency of this motion. To see it clearly, I set the damping to 0 to find out what the elasticity is. Now, the amount of elasticity of this circle is from here to here. It's also to note that as you increase the elasticity, the amount of the movement of the circle decreases. So I set it to 3, and then 1, this movement will increase. As you see, when I decrease this value, the movement of the circle will increase, and when I set it to 10, this movement will decrease. For example, now I set it to 2, so this movement increases. So the next option is damping. Damping means losing energy. This controls how long it takes to stop to move. That is, when you increase this value, the circle loses faster its kinetic energy and it stops. For example, now I set it to 3, so you look how it is. For example, if I set it to 10, it will stop much faster. And if I set it to 1, it will lose its energy much slower. Well, the next option is mode. This option is shown when you apply the spring to the properties that have 2 or 3 axis values, such as x, y, and z. But the properties with a single axis like rotation and opacity no longer have the mode option. Well, the mode includes 2 options. Basic or light, that the computation is lighter and it needs the keyframes. Simulation, that the computation is heavier but it doesn't need any keyframe anymore. Basic is what we have worked with so far. So to explain the simulation option, let me first delete these keyframes. I duplicate this layer and bring it above and delete its effect. I animate this position and parent the lower circle which the spring effect is assigned to the upper circle which has keyframes. As you can see, no spring effect looks here. But if I set the effect mode on simulation, then the spring effect will be applied without adding any keyframe to the lower circle. Another feature of the spring tool is jump, and you can also create a bounce for your layer. You can create a bounce for your layer if the property you've selected doesn't have 2 axis values like position. It should have 1 axis like rotation and opacity. However, you can create a bounce for the position if you spread its dimensions. For example, I animate its Y position and bring it down. To create a bounce, I select the Y position and click the spring. As you see, when we select a property with a single axis and then click on spring, the effect will change. Elasticity and damping are the same, but you have no longer the mode option, rather it has bounce. Now, if I play, it has last spring effect. But when I check the bounce, it will have a jump. To be able to adjust this effect properly, we first set damping to 0 so we can see the amplitude of the bounce. Well, that's fine. Then we set the damping. Let's go to the next option, blink. This option allows you to switch between 2 values. For example, I select the position of the circle and click on blink button. Now the position value is set for value A and 00 for value B. That's here. If I play, every second it goes here and returns. To give it the second value, I enable the locator of value B and click here. And then I want value A to be here. As you can see, it switches between the 2 positions once per second. The frequency option specifies the number of switching operations per second. For example, it now switches once per second. If I set to 2, it will switch twice per second. The ratio AB determines how much of a second is assigned to value A and how much to value B. For example, now it's 50. That means half a second is for the value A and the other half is for the value B. If I set it to 75, then 3/4 of a second are for the value A and a quarter for the value B. As you see, up here it's for value A, and here it switches to value B. Offset is also used to change the term of the billing cycle. Well, now the beginning of the billing cycle is value A, but we want it to start with the value B. You need to set this using offset option. When it's set above 50%, the billing starts with value B. The next option to explain is the move away. This tool is a simple cursor which controls the position and distance of the child layer relative to the parent layer. Let me explain the example. Well, I want to parent this circle to the green circle. So I've already parented it and now apply the move away to it. By clicking on it, an effect called move aways is created in the effect controls. For example, I animate the rotation of this parent layer. I write time in its expression so that it rotates continuously. Let me increase its value. As you see, when the green circle rotates, the pink circle also rotates following it. Well, as the pink circle is rotating, I want to increase and decrease its distance from the parent layer as well. To do this, first we create a keyframe here and go to second tree and increase the distance. I press U key to show my keyframes and I want to loop this movement. To do this, I hold on key and click on the stopwatch and then select loop out from the property menu and write ping pong instead of circle so it plays the loop, then backtrack to the beginning of the loop. So let's see how our animation works. The circle rotates around the green circle and also moves away and near to it. This is the function of this tool, but how and in what project you use it depends on your creativity.